Welcome. In this short video, we're going to introduce the modern portfolio theory. Modern portfolio theory, as it's known today, was introduced by Harry Markowitz in a paper dating back to 1952. For his work, Markowitz was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1990. But to get a true feeling of its significance, we will rewind time back more than 3,000 years to around 1750 BC in the Babylonian Empire ruled by King Hammurabi. Hammurabi had a deep interest in law and justice. During his reign, he commissioned a 7-foot-tall basalt stele called the Code of Hammurabi. The stele contained a large number of laws or codes for life under his reign. Several laws dealt directly with interest payments. For example, Code 88 set the maximum interest rate for grains and silver, while Code 92 specified punishment for overcharging interest rates. So what's my point here? Simply that rates of returns, or interest rates, have been understood for thousands of years. It's not a modern concept. In the context of this course, we'll call the rate of return or the return a metric or a measure. It happens to be non-dimensional and it's easy to understand. The next metric used in modern portfolio theory has been quite elusive for thousands of years. The metric deals with risk. For thousands of years, humans have been well aware of risk. What we did not have is an actual way of measuring risk. There has been no metric for risk in the same way as return, that is, until the introduction of modern portfolio theory by Harry Markowitz. So up to that point in history, how was risk handled? Was there a universal definitive metric for risk? Previous to modern portfolio theory, it seems that risk was treated as a rule of thumb with no definitive metric. If we go all the way back to around 900 BC, we'll see a verse in the NLT version of Ecclesiastes that says, quote, "But divide your investment among many places, for you do not know what the risk may lie ahead." Quote. Verses that follow seem to describe a variety of natural risk scenarios or disasters that can befall humanity. A more recent phrase used today is, quote, "Don't put all your eggs in one basket," quote. The phrase just might have originated in a Spanish to English translation of the book Don Quixote, written in the early 1600s. The phrase seems to focus on controlling risk in a portfolio. This eggs in a basket phrase can be used to explore risk in detail. Let's examine a possible scenario. Let's say you split your eggs into 5 baskets. Yet all the baskets are placed on one cart. The cart rolls down the hill, crashes into the street, and breaks all the baskets and all the eggs inside. This is a strange analogy. Let me explain with a concrete example. Everyone remembers the 2008 crash. During and after this crash, General Motors became a highly distressed company. I knew of several people who worked for a small manufacturing firm that supplied subparts for all the radiators in the GM trucks. As it turns out, this company disappeared for obvious reasons. So these 2 baskets, or companies, were on the same cart. One crashing down the hill took the other one with it. So at this point, we could stop and make a few generalized comments about a risk of a portfolio. The first one would be, including more investments in the portfolio tends to reduce risk. The second generalized comment is there are some types of connections between securities in a portfolio that can affect risk. We could use the phrase baskets on the same cart to go along with the phrase eggs in one basket. So it stands to reason that any risk metric used in a portfolio theory should address these 2 common sense observations in this way. 1, the overall portfolio risk metric used should decrease as the number of assets are increased. Number 2, the portfolio risk metric should self-identify and adjust to the assets that follow the baskets in the same cart behavior. That is, adding more assets that are essentially in the same cart, the portfolio risk might not decrease that much, if any. In short, if you are able to get a risk metric and include more investments in your portfolio, the risk of the portfolio should decrease slightly as long as the investments in your portfolio are not coupled together by riding on the same cart down the hill. As it turns out, the risk metric used in modern portfolio theory handles both of these common sense observations. 2 investments that are riding on the same cart down the hill can be observed by looking at the numerical correlation between those investments. For example, if two investments are highly correlated, they're going to ride down the hill together, meaning if one goes down the hill, the other will go down the hill with it. Two investments that are not correlated generally act independently of each other and, therefore, are not riding on the same cart rolling down the hill. In addition, if two investments are negatively correlated, one will be going uphill on one cart while the other goes downhill on another cart. This negative correlation situation can reduce the risk of a portfolio. What we'll find as we go through this course is the more investments in a portfolio, the risk tends to drop below the risk of any individual security in the portfolio. So in review, Harry Markowitz's modern portfolio theory was highly significant due to the use of a concrete risk metric. Using this risk metric and including more securities in a portfolio reduces the overall risk in the portfolio, something that makes common sense. The portfolio theory also deals with correlated and uncorrelated securities, meaning it can identify which securities are highly correlated with each other and which ones are not. The portfolio theory will adjust the holdings of these correlated and uncorrelated securities in such a way as to obtain the lowest risk for a given return, or the portfolio can be constructed to give the largest return for a given risk. There's something I should say before we go any further. Many people use modern portfolio theory and diversification in the same sentence. They often imply that using modern portfolio theory will guarantee diversification. However, diversification is not guaranteed in modern portfolio theory. What we will show later in this course is that often finding the maximum return for a given risk involves giving up diversification. One would think that using modern portfolio theory would always guarantee a high level of diversification. However, as we'll see later, an unconstrained use of modern portfolio theory can be problematic if we wish to ensure a diversified portfolio. In other words, we will not use statements like modern portfolio theory will always give this or that. Our goal in this course is to give everyone the tools necessary to carry out their own investigations and to make their own conclusions about their situations. Finance is much like life. It's very messy and somewhat subjective. There are very powerful and concrete tools that can help us clean up the messy world of finance and to make sense of it all. Modern portfolio theory is an incredibly powerful tool that can be used to clean up the messy world of constructing financial portfolios.